Right from the India Stack, which was extensively talked at the G20 summit in India recently, to India's own digital personal data protection bill, and even the production link incentives for IT hardware, which saw 40 companies participate in the scheme. Today, we have the man behind all this action, Minister Rajeev Chandrasekhar, who is the Minister of State for Ministry of IT and Electronics. India Stack has dominated the conversations at the recent G20 summit, and we have seen a lot of countries really showing interest in our stack. So, how is the government going to offer the India Stack to them?
We are now calling it the India DPI because the DPI is a phrase now during the Indian presidency of the G20. The phrase DPI has now been defined, the framework has been framed, principles of the DPI have all been put together, and there is a consensus now, the framework, the architecture, and the principles of what is a DPI,
Right.
what is the functionality of a DPI. So, what India has done in the last 9 years, from Aadhaar to UPI to eSanjeevani to DigiLocker to Bhashini to all of these multiple DPIs, we are offering to them as a stack or individually to any country who wants it. And the Prime Minister has said that we certainly want to enable the global South countries,
Right.
who have, in a sense, in a way, been left out of the digitization train or the bandwagon or the momentum for several years because of what they believe was an expensive process or a process that depended too much on big tech companies. And we have now offered it to them and created in parallel with the G20 the concept of a global DPI repository, which will all be open source, which will all be available to any country that wants to take that, customize that, all of it, part of it, and develop their own digital model of governance and digital model of innovation in startups. So I think we have about 8 to 9 countries that have signed MOUs today. We can today, if you want to, sign another 30.
Okay.
The interest is that deep and that significant. But we also certainly are not sitting with a ready-made amount of talent or a talent pool or a developer ecosystem that can support all of this at the same time. So we are, in a sense, working on these 8 countries initially and building the developer ecosystem in India, building the skilling capabilities in India for helping not just implement this stack or transfer the technology of the India DPI, but at the same time helping their own ecosystems, build their own startups and their own development and customization capabilities. So it is free of cost as far as the government of India is concerned. It is open source, so there can be very many different variants. Trinidad and Tobago could have a variant of the UPI. Sierra Leone could have a variant of the Aadhaar. And the global DPI repository will have all of these various DPIs from various countries, whether they originate from the India DPI or their own. And that is available for the next round of countries who want to have the DPI implemented in their economies.
What kind of new services are you looking at integrating in DPI? What is MITI thinking?
No, that's a good question, but I can only say this because there is a cabinet note that's pending cabinet approval. That is effectively Prime Minister's vision that there will be no part of government that will be left without being digitalized.
Right.
So effectively you will see DPI is now spanning the entire spectrum of current government public services and anything that we are planning in the future. So I mean, it may be shocking for you to hear or surprising depending on which way you are inclined, but I think there will be at least about 20 to 30 new applications that will pile up on the India DPI that will be addressing different slivers of the public service stack, that is the India stack or the India DPI.
India finally has its Digital Personal Data Protection Act. So, how can citizens access their right in this act?
It's very simple that once the DPDP is notified, of course, once the Data Protection Board is notified, and they will have an online portal or an online platform. And the moment you are a data principal, which is a user, all you have to do is just send your complaint on that portal to the DPB, and the DPB then swings into action.
Okay.
The DPP does not need a lawyer to petition it. The DPP, and in a lot of ways, the preamble of it or the trailer of it is visible in the grievance appellate committee design. I don't know if you've seen the grievance appellate committee. The grievance appellate committee is now something that sits on appeal of an individual citizen to a grievance officer of a platform, and if he or she is dissatisfied with the grievance officer's response, you can come to a grievance appellate committee that the government formed and notified to the IT rules. And that is a totally digital platform. And we are now seeing far more responsiveness on the grievance officers' parts of all of these big tech platforms than before the grievance appellate committee. So very similar to that design and the learnings of the grievance appellate committee design, we are taking to the data protection board. And for you, for example, it will simply be like going to a website, sending an email with your details, and then the DPP will send a notice to the platform or the data fiduciary and copy you on it, and the process will swing into action.
The IT hardware industry is hoping for an extension on the imports that have been recently imposed by the government. Is there any extension in store for them?
The government of India is looking at the entire market for IT products, including servers and laptops, as a proxy for the growth of the Indian internet and the proxy for the rapid growth of digitization in the Indian economy, which will throw up as a consequence of that a much increased demand for IT products, both at the laptop segment and in the more complex server and the cloud and data center segment. And we believe that the Indian market is poised to grow and become one of the fastest growing markets for us. Now, we certainly want, therefore, to transition from a supply chain that is today almost 78% imported, and from sources that we don't necessarily fully trust because they are from some particular countries. And that is a principle that we have applied to telecom as well, that going forward we want the entire internet, the telecom layer and the hardware and IT hardware layer on the internet that powers the internet, powers the data centers and the users hardware, to be from trusted sources. So that decision is already taken. So we have to move and transition from an import dependent supply chain to a trusted supply chain. The second part of our goal is that this trusted supply chain has in it a larger presence of the domestic supply chain. So this we are going to do anyway, and we have to do. Now the transitioning between the today's model and tomorrow's model is a transition that needs to be done. Some people will transition it as saying that we will manufacture all of it in India instead of wherever they're doing it. Some people will say we'll manufacture part of it in India and part of it we'll import. So what we are saying today is this transition you need to do. You tell us how long it will take to transition, but don't make the transition something that will defeat the government's objectives.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.